Thank you very much. Okay, so we are starting with third chapter, Karma Yoga. So I was saying, so we are all engaged in activities, right, all the time. This earth is also called Karma Bhumi because it facilitates action. Hmm? Not even for a moment can any of us be without doing any action, right? Um, so if I say that, how many of you don't agree? How many of you don't agree that we are doing something or the other all the time? Isn't it? Every moment we are doing some action or the other. So somebody might say, okay, what about when I'm sleeping? So even when I'm sleeping, I decided to sleep, right? So it's an action. So no action is also an action because that is also done willingly. Hmm? So this is a land of action, and every action has a reaction. Our scientists got this right. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Here it's not opposite, but corresponding reaction. So if we do, so work can be divided into three types generally. First is called karma, which is work which is doable or which is acceptable, allowed as per scriptures. Now, allowed, not allowed, it is not based on our whims, but it is based on rules and regulations that have been put down in the scriptures. Now, one might ask, what is the point in following these rules? So, it's like, what is the point in following the rules of traffic? Right now, if we follow that, then, we will be safe. If we don't follow, then there are two possibilities. One is we either risk ourselves, meet with an accident, or second thing is we might be punished subsequently for breaking the rule. So same thing applies for even the rules of material nature. So these are called the laws of karma. So if we break the laws of karma, then we are at risk and we will get punished. Now, unlike a material traffic police situation where we will get punished only if there is a police cop standing there and witnessing us, um, this law cannot be escaped. The law of karma cannot be escaped. So if we do action which is acceptable by the scriptures, then we get what is called as punya, merit, pious result, right? So which is generally happiness, some kind of happiness, right? So what are things that give us happiness? Money, wealth, or some possessions, or sometimes people become happy because they're beautiful or because they're very intelligent. So whatever makes us happy, that comes from good karma, right? Or karma that is accepted as per scriptures. Then the second is called vikarma. Vikarma is bad karma. Now this bad karma results in bad result, which is nothing but suffering. So all the suffering in this material world that we are seeing today and forever is a result of our bad karma. So we cannot, when somebody is suffering, one cannot say that, why is this suffering coming to me? The simple answer is that because we have done something that warrants us to be punished that way. And the laws of karma are very stringent. There is no escape route. We can't bribe anybody. We can't, go under the radar. We can't do anything. Yeah, I mean, if you're doing something wrong, we have to suffer results of those karma. And that results in, suffering, which I am sure all of us, none of us wants suffering, right? So this is a result of bad karma. So intelligence obviously would want us to think, saying that what can I do so that I can avoid this bad karma? So we will address that. And then the third one is a very interesting category of karma, which neither produces any good results nor bad results. Okay, for those who are new to Bhagavad Gita, good results punya, bad results papa. This is our karma balance. Okay, so this karma balance is like our bank account. The only difference between bank account and karma account is eternal. Eternal means that it continues life after life. Okay, now obviously, which means that there is life after death. Unlike most Westerners thinking that there's only one life. Make merry, be happy, do whatever you want, and that's it. Forget it. Right after you die, then there's nothing. Don't have to bother about don't have to be responsible about your action, which is totally meaningless. And which is can be concluded very simply with very simple logic. Okay, so just for the benefit of those who might not completely believe reincarnation or rebirth, I can just put this argument across and you can think about it for yourself. All of us believe that the Supreme Lord, God, is very merciful, right? God is very merciful, right? Nobody denies that. Nobody dare say that God is cruel, right? Because then it puts us in a very difficult situation. If God is cruel, then what will happen to us? We don't know, right? Like, is God sitting and putting a toss? Okay, whom am I going to trouble today? No, God is not like that. God is merciful. Yes, truly God is merciful. Now, what that mercy means, we should try and understand. So God is merciful. So when we look at somebody, say two children born, and one of them unfortunately doesn't have some organ, maybe doesn't have eyes, and the other one is completely perfect, born in a very rich, noble family, lot of money, lot of facilities, etc., etc. Now, if somebody asks, what is it that this one child did because of which it doesn't have vision, and how come the other child is in such a comfortable, position, right? Now, obviously, there are multiple answers that can be given, right? One is chance, right? Oh, bad luck, it just happened to you. We can think about it, what kind of situation will be in if somebody says, okay, bad luck, it's all just luck. So, you just toss a coin every day and just keep guessing, okay, what's going to happen for to whom. Yeah, very insecure. I mean, makes us very insecure, and definitely not. I mean, if simple thing like, things that you do at your home, you kind of plan and do it, and there's some action and there's some expected reaction, etc., etc. Suddenly you can't say that, okay, I'm just sitting and watching my cooker and suddenly food is ready. Right, so it just can't be like, okay, or one day I put everything into the cooker and it whistle blew, everything happened, but it didn't, food was not there at all, right? And another day food was there. I mean, it'll just make you crazy, right? So it's not a very sane proposition. Second possibility is God is merciless. God is cruel. So because of which he just decides to punish somebody one fine day, which again goes against our this one saying that God is merciful. So that also is not possible. So then what else? What could be a third reason because of which some person is having difficulty and the other not, right? If the system is fair, then it is should be because of our own actions, right? And obviously it is not actions that we have done in this life, because that child is just born, so must be an action reaction from something in the past, right? So that kind of in a simple way tries to prove rebirth. So anyway, rebirth is there. It's like the traffic rule, whether we believe it or not, you jump the signal, you're going to get fined, right? So so karma, vikarma, and akarma, and I was saying this karma account is eternal. So, but unlike our bank balance, now one qualification or one quality of our bank balance is you have 100 rupees, you take out 10 rupees, then you're left with 90 rupees, right? So it decreases. And when you put money, it increases. And it, balances off, right? You take out something, you put something, it balances off. Now, karma account is not like that. So karma account, fortunately or unfortunately for us, if there is plus, it exists. If there is minus, there is a separate account for debit, right? It doesn't get balanced off, right? So which means that if you do some good work, you have to enjoy the benefits of that good work. And if you do some bad work, you also have to enjoy the results of that bad work. Now, it's not that the bad work will balance out the good work or vice versa, right? So both you will have to experience. You will have to enjoy also as well as suffer, right? One has to enjoy and suffer. So now this so big, and since most of us are engaged in karma, so karma looks like a very critical thing for us to understand, right? But unfortunately, most of us, I mean, at least till I came into Krishna consciousness, till I came into to understanding Bhagavad Gita, I had no clue about what karma is, that I should be responsible about my action, that every action results in a reaction, and day in and day out we are busy accumulating reactions and without knowing if it is going to do good for us or bad. I mean, it sounds very unintelligent. So So only when we come to Bhagavad Gita can we actually understand, oh, okay, this is right, this is wrong, we need to avoid this, we need to do this, and thereby in some sense protect ourselves from doing things that will result in suffering for us in the future, right? So this chapter Karma Yoga talks about how, as people who are always engaged in some kind of action or the other, how do we ensure that we do right kind of work, right? And what is that right kind of work, how to do it, etc. Now Arjuna starts off this chapter, so let me read the words. Arjuna vacha jayasi chet karmanaste matha buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. So Arjuna is saying, oh Janardana, oh Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? So let me explain a few things. So why do you want me to engage in this ghastly warfare? Because the first chapter is about Arjuna telling that he's not interested in fighting because he thinks it's not a good thing to do, because he thinks he cannot be killing his superiors, relatives, etc., etc. And he tries to give multiple arguments, trying to substantiate his position that he's not going to fight, right? And yeah, Prashant Prabhu is shared the third chapter from Vedabase. If somebody is interested, you can click the link on the chat. And the second chapter, actually, Arjuna becomes bewildered, saying, Krishna, I'm not sure, actually, while I've given a lot of arguments, say, which are supporting my stance that I'm not going to fight, but I still am confused. Though, can you please, and he says, I'm surrendering unto you. You become my guru and you teach me. And then we discuss saying that, absolutely it's imperative that everybody gets a spiritual guru and who is authorized and through whom one learns the instructions of Bhagavad Gita. And then Krishna starts speaking the whole Bhagavad Gita. And in the second chapter, we talked about the very basic ABCD of spiritual life, which says, I am not this body, I'm spirit soul. And just for the benefit of those who joined today for the first time, so because I'm the soul, I don't have death. I can't be destroyed. Only the body gets destroyed, right? And body is just like a piece of cloth, and when it becomes old, we just throw it and we buy a new one. So the body is just like that. It's just a vehicle. It's just clothing which is external to us. We are the spirit soul. This is a vehicle that we are using to accomplish certain things, just like you have a vehicle to take you from one place to another. This body is supposed to take you from one place to another. Now, which obviously the first question that comes is, where are we headed? Where are we going, and what should we do with this? Just like before you get into a car, you say, okay, where am I going? I know the destination, and hence I'm driving in that direction, right? So similarly, in the human form of life, we need to know what this body is for, where is it taking me? Can I steer it into a different direction, etc., etc., right? So, yeah, so Arjuna spoke about that, but Krishna spoke about that, and in one of the verses, Krishna uses a word called Buddhi Yoga. Now, when Krishna speaks Buddhi Yoga, Arjuna understood it differently, right? While Krishna meant something else, Arjuna thought that Buddhi Yoga means yoga, like I said, yoga is to connect with the Lord. Buddhi is intelligence. So Krishna said Buddhi Yoga means use your intelligence in everything that you do so that you can connect with the Lord. Okay. But Arjuna understood it as saying that use your intelligence to not do work, because generally intelligent people in this world, you might have heard of this elsewhere. There are gnanis. Now, gnanis are people who are not interested in work, right? Like poets, philosophers. They're not interested in routine work, working for somebody, earning money, etc. Right? They are in their own world, right? They're supposed to be intelligent people, right? And historically, there is karma yoga, there is gnana yoga. So Arjuna thought that Krishna was talking about using the word buddhi yoga to refer to gnana yoga. But then subsequently Krishna tells, no, fight. Now Arjuna is confused. So Arjuna starts off this chapter saying that, okay, I'm confused about whether should I act or not act. So you said use intelligence, but then you're saying work. So can you kindly clarify what you are actually meaning? Should I work? Should I not work? Because I've surrendered to you. You are my teacher. So I need to understand very clearly your instructions so that I can follow it. Right. So he thought of Buddhi Yoga as some kind of retirement. Right. Like he thought Krishna is telling him, Arjuna, you know what, you have a tough time ahead, but don't worry, you just retire from, your duty, which is to fight because you're a Kshatriya, and you just go retire, read a newspaper, do whatever you want, and I'll take care of stuff here on the battlefield. So Arjuna thought that Krishna is, referring to that kind of yoga, which is actually not yoga at all. So Arjuna was in, like most of us, he was, though he's a eternally enlightened soul, he is just demonstrating some kind of ignorance for our benefit, so that Krishna can reveal the truth. And then he says, Vyamishrene vakyena buddhim mohesi vame tadekam vada nishchitya yena shreyoham apnuyam. He's saying, my intelligence is bewildered. It looks like you've spoken equivocal instructions, meaning it seems like it is, true, but not true, right? Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. So should I fight or not fight? So should I work or not work, right, for us? Arjuna's work was fighting. So whenever we talk about fight, you should please think about it as work. Should I work or not work? What should my work be? Should I give up my work? What kind of work should I be engaged in, etc. So Lord replies, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Dvividha Nishta Pura Prokta Maya Naga Gnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. So Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Bhagavan, right? Krishna is answering, oh sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. So this whole process is about realizing the self. So that is why it is called self-realization. Self-realization means to realize who is this self. Because all along we've been looking at ourselves and thinking self equals body, meaning me means my body. Oh, by the way, English is very funny, but here it works well. When you say me equals my body, it doesn't make sense, right? Because me and my indicates possession, possessive form, right? So when you say my, that means that this body, when I say my body, that means this body should belong to somebody. So you can't say me equals my body, right? So, but we've lived all our life thinking me means my body, right? Self means my body. And so when the body is gone, everything is gone. Though, of course, in India, fortunately, we are in India and we have some understanding of Atma, soul. And, when somebody dies, inevitably across the country, whatever language you're speaking, people talk about like he's gone. Who's gone? Right? The body that you knew and related to all your life is right there. But we still say you're gone, and then some bit of, renunciation for a few days. We hear some Shastra, we become slightly disconnected, detached from worldly things, but then in course of time we again jump back, spring back into our usual routine, right? So but it's important to understand the self. This is the real question that one needs to be able to answer for himself or herself, saying that who am I? So here Krishna is saying that you try to realize the self. To try to realize the self, there are two types. One of them do by empirical philosophical speculation. So they say, okay, am I this? No. Am I this? No. Am I this? No. Neti, 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 not this, not this, not this. So they keep doing logical assertion, conclusion, then, go and look up something else. So just logically, they're trying to conclude, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Right? And then there are others who are actually do this by devotional service. So there are two kinds, two paths. One is through gnana, which is this philosophical speculation, and the second one is through karma or through bhakti. Right? Now we can talk about karma and yoga and bhakti yoga similar, but there's a big difference. But for now, we will use the word bhakti, and I will connect karma to this. Right? So Krishna is saying there are two types. There is one who do gnana, and then there is one who do yoga through karma, right, to action, and the other does without action. So there's one who does with action, there are other group which does without action, right, in some sense. So Krishna is going to explain these two. And he says this philosophical speculation process is an indirect process. There is no guarantee that you're going to reach the goal because it's indirect. right? It's like instead of eating like this, you try to eat like this. No, there's no guarantee that the food actually food will reach our mouth, right? It might just fall off somewhere in the middle, right? So which basically means that gnana, there are so many branches of knowledge, so much of knowledge out there. There's no guarantee that one is going to reach their goal, right? They might just get lost somewhere. But bhakti is very clear and clear. It's very clear cut and very directed, right? It has a goal, and when one practices the path of bhakti, then they will reach the goal. There's no doubt about it. So Krishna also says, ma karmana na karmana manarambha naishkarmyam purushoshnute nacha sanyasana deva siddhim samadhigacchati. Not by merely abstaining from work, right? One can achieve freedom from reaction, not by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So neither can you say that I'm not going to do my work. I'm not given up my work, but I just simply say I'm not interested in doing my work. And then there is other one who actually is renounced. He's just completely given up work, right? And he said, no, the work is not for me. He's given up work, right? The other one has not given up, but once in a while he'll say, okay, I will do. Another time he'll say, no, I don't, I won't do. Or he'll say, I'm interested in this. Next time he'll say, no, this is not, I want to do something else, right? But Krishna is saying, see, you can't just abstain from work, nor can you just renounce work. Both of these is not going to help you achieve perfection, help you realize yourself. So which means that you have to do work. So Krishna is concluding here saying that, see, you can't just simply abstain from work or just say I'm given up everything, right? No, you have to work. And then he says a beautiful sentence. He says, Nai kaschit kshanamapi jato tishtata karma krit karyate yavashav karma sarva prakriti jair gunai. He's saying everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So this requires some explanation. So first is that everyone is forced to act helplessly. Well, now when we think about it, we might think, no, it doesn't look like I'm acting helplessly. I'm acting with thought, with logic, and I think I deliberate over something, and then I decide to do something, isn't it? So it doesn't look like I'm acting helplessly. Now, how do I understand this? Now, the other part that he's talking about is, he says you are acting helplessly according to something, not according to someone, according to something which is internal to you, which is internal to each of us. Now, what is this internal to each of us? It is called nature. So you say, oh, this person's nature is like this. We say like that, right? He won't change. His nature is like that. So Krishna is talking about this nature. He's defining what this nature is, which we very passingly, very casually talk about, saying nature. But it is actually true. There is something called nature. All of us have something called nature. So there are three types of nature, basic natures available. And then, of course, each person has a combination of these, or sometimes one mode. We call this mode. So there are three modes, right? Sometimes one becomes superior, sometimes other becomes superior, etc. Now, just for everybody's understanding, I'm going to show a picture here, which will help us understand what these modes do. What these modes do. Okay, so these modes are like this, if you can see, right? So these are like puppets. Like we are like puppets. The man standing there with hockey stick beating somebody else. But if you see all their hands, legs, everything is being tied to some strings, and looks like there's some three ladies on top who are kind of pulling these strings, right? Like looks like a puppet game, puppet show. So there are three modes, like I said, three modes. So the first one is called mode of goodness. The second one is mode of passion, and the third one is mode of ignorance. So to explain it simply, mode of ignorance is characterized by dullness, sleep, insolence. Like we want to just, drink. People want to just get drunk and just forget themselves. This is ignorance. They don't want to do anything. They just want to forget themselves, right? This is mode of ignorance. Then there is mode of passion. Now most of the people in this material world are in the mode of passion. So what is passion? Simply put, busy. I am busy. So if you say I am busy, that means I'm in the mode of passion, which means that I want to just run from one thing to another, just do this, do that, do this, mode of passion. Third one is mode of goodness. Now mode of people who are in mode of goodness, they are characterized by knowledge. They're not running around people. They are just like headless chicken running plus one place to another. No, they have knowledge. They have an understanding of who they are to some extent, why they are here, or at least they understand, some more basic values. Like people talk about good values, right? Like not to be selfish, not to trouble others, to be helpful to others, etc., etc. Maybe they go to temples, they do some pious work, they do charity. General good people, so-called good people in this world, right? Not those selfish, self-centered people who are just running around day in day out just behind money and position and happiness and enjoyment, go to places, see this, buy this, not that. That is the mode of passion. So generally, these are three categories of people. Right now, of course, one cannot say that I am purely, we cannot say I'm purely in the mode of goodness or purely in the mode of passion or purely in the mode of ignorance. No, because sometime I'm in the mode of goodness. Some other time I might be in the mode of passion. Some other time in the mode of ignorance. So Krishna says subsequently in Bhagavad Gita, saying that, these modes are such that sometime one becomes more powerful than the other and it overpowers the other modes, right? But now if you think about it, okay, for a moment, just think about these modes, right? Now these modes, it is a type of behavior. It's a type of behavior. The mode means a type of behavior, and these modes actually drive our thinking, the way we are, what we like, what we dislike, how we speak, how we think. Everything is driven by these modes. It's like those strings. These strings are they're invisible strings, right? So we think that no, I'm in control. Actually, I am not in control. Who am I anyway? I mean, and I say I am in control. Who am I? That itself requires understanding, right? So the modes are in control. So the modes that I am in are in control. So I am in certain mode. I might be in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, or mode of ignorance, or I might be in 50% goodness, 25% of 40% passion, 10% ignorance, or whatever combination I might be in, right? So my thinking, my nature, everything is controlled by these modes. That is why we say things like, you can't change this person. Have you heard this? We say that, oh, no, this person is like this only. I don't think anybody can change him or her, right? He's been like this throughout his life. He'll be like that throughout his life. So these natures this is very intrinsic to us. Very, it is, can't be changed very easily. Can't be changed, ... very easily. Which means that it can be changed, but we need to know what the process is. So Krishna here is saying, see, by the way, so everybody is controlled by these modes. Now, because we are controlled by these modes, we are forced to act. So when you are forced to act, what does this mean? Person in the mode of ignorance is forced to sleep. His mode pushes him to sleep. He cannot think of doing anything else. Person in the mode of passion can't sit for a moment, simply, peacefully, idly, because his modes are pushing him. Karo, kuch karo, karo, do something, do something. Why are you wasting time? Person in the mode of goodness, he can't do this, ignorance and passion business. His modes drive him to do something else. But we act helplessly. We can't really control ourselves. So which means, like, if somebody asks us to do something which is not our nature, we say, no, I can't, I have to do. This is what, I feel comfortable. This is what I think I should be doing. We might give some argument, logic, etc., whatever, but we just do end up doing whatever we want to do. And this is the reason why there is so much of disturbance in relations, right? Why? Because, this is very interesting, the connection between modes and marriage and relationships, right? Not just marriage, any relationship, but more importantly marriage, because most people spend their life with in as part of their family, and especially now, in lockdown. It's very funny actually, when last year when all these things started, I was talking to so many people saying like, how do I spend time at home? I mean, I'm not used to being around with my spouse, and I don't know what to speak. Like, can you help me? Right, because we are so not used to, while we might talk about marriage and all that, but most people are just live a very independent life, right? And they come together just for a very short period of time, otherwise everybody is just lost in their work or whatever responsibilities. Anyway, so the point is this nature, the idea is that if two people have similar nature, it helps them to get along. If their thoughts are aligned or they think alike, if somebody says I want to go left, the other person also says yeah, right, I also was just thinking about it, so it becomes very easy. Okay, you want to go to this mall or that mall? Okay, I think this mall. Yes, I also think we should go here. Okay, so very easy, no argument, no confrontation, no conflict. But then if suppose somebody says I want to go left and then the other person says I want to go right, that means that their natures are not compatible. If our natures are not compatible, that results in lot of challenges in relationships. And which is why our ancestors were all extremely intelligent, and we simply think that they're fools, they didn't know anything, they're all superstitious, did some meaningless rituals, practices. Classic one is seeing horoscope for marriage. Why were they seeing horoscopes? They crazy? They were not, because horoscope matching is nature matching, mapping nature of two individuals, right? So when the natures map and they map and say, okay, how much is the overlap? Okay, is it up to 80-85%? That means okay, good, sufficient compatibility is there. Now go ahead with the marriage, they'll be happy and they'll live for each other, help each other, and do well in their life. But 30%, 40% means conflict. 50% of the times there'll be conflict, right? And then obviously that results in people being frustrated, marriages break, etc., 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 which has become so prevalent in India nowadays, which was unheard of in the past, right? Why? Because we simply just dropped one of the practices that was being followed previously, which is to match horoscopes, right? So this nature has because nature is so strong, right? We can't just simply overcome it, right? So here Krishna is saying, whether you want to work or not, you will be forced to work. Don't worry, right? As in, it is so powerful that you will be forced to work, right? So you better anyway work. So you now figure out, saying that what kind of work suits your nature, what aligns with your nature, right? So he's saying, therefore, one cannot refrain from doing anything even for a moment. So even for a moment, we cannot just keep quiet. We're doing something or the other. Like I said, sleeping is also doing something, right? Is to sleep. Now, then there is, so there these three modes of nature are there, right? Now, what happens with these modes of nature is they drive us to do material things which are materially oriented. And like I said previously, they push us to do either karma or vikarma. Either they push us to do good work or they push us to do bad work. The problem is, if we are getting pushed to do good work, then we are fortunate in some sense, but not very fortunate. But it's better than doing bad work, because work is going to result in a lot of suffering, right? But good work, at least it's okay. It's going to give you happiness. It's going to give you wealth. It's going to give you intelligence, education, beauty, etc., etc. All these Janma, Aishwarya, Sutashri, good birth, money. Suta is education, and she is beauty. So good work gives us these four things, which is okay, but for the simple reason that we have to still be in this material world, and this material world is a place of misery. Even if we are happy, everything is good for us, sometimes our relatives are not happy, our siblings are not happy, our parents are not happy, somebody else is not happy, right? And we look at their suffering and we feel bad, and we feel frustrated sometimes, right? And also for us also, it's not like we would be 100% we would have done all good work. So even for us, there will be like intermittently there will be suffering. And and then we come to ask this question, saying that why should I suffer, right? So to answer this, why should I suffer, we also have to act, but in the mode of akarma, like I said, where there is no punya or papa. There's no pious credit nor impious credit, right? Which is the devotional service to the Lord. When we do devotional service to the Lord, then there is no karma accumulation. And this devotional service simply means four things, right? Extremely it's been made so easy for people of Kali Yuga. We call it ABCD. A is association, associate with the devotees, right, who are trying to serve the Lord. B is books. Try to read Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. Fortunately for us, it's not in Sanskrit. Srila Prabhupada, who's our founder Acharya of ISKCON, has presented all of this in a very simple, easy to understand language. Of course, it's in English. It's also been translated to many Indian languages and even non-Indian languages. It's also in Urdu, for example. Now we should read these books, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. We should start with Bhagavad Gita and complete it few times before then we progress to the next stage, right? And of course, there are multiple stages in this, right? C is chanting. So we chant the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We'll talk about why and all that later, but these are things that we should be doing every day. And D is diet, right? We eat food which is offered only to Krishna. So if we do this ABCD, then these activities will not get us any karma phala. So we don't have to suffer, neither do we have to come back here to enjoy. We go somewhere else to enjoy, so to have to experience happiness. I want to use the word enjoy because it has a negative connotation in the world of scriptures. So we will experience happiness, ananda, which is what we are here for. We are all here to experience happiness. We will experience the right kind of happiness, if we do these four activities. So, but yes, we are all forced to act. We should understand this. Now, there is also another important thing to understand in this, right? Now, when somebody acts in a way which is not likable to you, right? You don't like the way somebody is acting. Now, we should understand that person is being forced to act in that particular way because of his or her modes of nature, right? So just as I am helpless because I don't like what he or she is doing, right? When I say I don't like, now who decides who's right, who's wrong, right? It's just two parties, right? I say I don't like, now other person says I like, and when you sit and discuss who's right, who's wrong, both of them will say I'm right. So there is nobody who's right, nobody who's wrong. It's just some person's preference in that sense, right? I'm talking about very simple situations at home, etc., right? So we should understand that when somebody is acting in a way which is not in line with my requirement, that just is basically because we are two different individuals and we have two different natures. Now we should not. So we should learn to accommodate people, right? Very important that we should learn to accommodate people. Understand that there are different kinds of people in this world. If everybody is of my type, then that also becomes boring, isn't it? So there is variety and there's a reason for this variety and we accept it. And of course, then together jointly work towards raising above this nature, which we'll talk about later, right? But yes, till we are working on our nature, trying to improve it, each person is as good as the other. There's really no big difference between somebody in the mode of passion versus mode of ignorance. While there might be a incremental, one might be slightly better than the other, but for all practical purposes we should understand saying that we should accept person who's in that mode and help that person to raise. So somebody is in the mode of ignorance should come to the mode of passion, should finally come to the mode of goodness, right? So basically just accommodate, tolerate people. That's one side note. So verse 6, कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य यास्ते मनसा स्मरन् इंद्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचारः उच्यते. So here he is saying, see, one who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So Krishna here is talking about so-called jnanis who want to give up action. They want to just give up action. So he's saying, hey, okay, by the way, they might give up action, but if their mind, they're thinking about this sense object. So suppose somebody says, okay, I'm given up ice cream from today. But then, every time I go to the ice cream parlor or somebody is eating ice cream, I keep looking at this and say, okay, I also want ice cream. I also want ice cream. So Krishna is saying such people are pretenders, right? They are actually cheaters, right? Because actually they have not overcome that their desire. Now why are they just pretending to overcome, or why are they pretending to give up that desire? This is not what needs to be done. We should not artificially give up things like this. That's worse. Instead, he says, he gives an alternative, which he says is a better option. He says, Yasva indriyani manasa niyamya rabate arjuna karmendriyai karmayogam asakta savishishate. Instead, a sincere person should try to control his active senses. So our senses are active. What are our senses? Active senses: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, etc. Right? Skin. These are our active senses. He says one should try to control the active senses by the mind. So the mind is called the sixth sense, not the sixth sense, but six number sense, right? And so he's saying, by using the mind, one should control the senses and should begin this karma yoga, which is otherwise called Krishna consciousness, without attachment. So now he is talking about what is the way to do work. So he's saying work, but without attachment. He's going to explain this in future verses, right? And he's saying, see, this is by far superior. Now, don't be artificial. Don't simply say from tomorrow I'm going to give up everything. I'm going to become a yogi, right? Or some renunciant. No, don't be so artificial, because you're not going to be able to hold that position for long. And we have seen this, right? Year after year, all of us have tried to do some New Year resolution or other and miserably failed, right? Inevitably, our promises or vows go for maybe a week, 10 days, and that's it. After that, just slip back to our original positions, right? Because our natures are too strong. We can't simply very easily just by our own strength overcome those or change those. And I give this example of a Maruti van. If it doesn't start, you have to push from back behind, right? Why? Because by itself the vehicle is not able to start. So by ourselves we cannot change this nature of ours, right? We need some external push, we need some external help, right? So which we'll talk about later. So he concludes this topic in some sense saying niyatam kuru karmatvam karmajjayoya karmanah sharira yatra pichate na prasiddhyeta karmanah. So he says, so perform your prescribed duty. So you should perform your prescribed duty because you are anyway going to be forced to act. So in some sense, he's telling Arjuna, don't think that you're going to give up this fighting, go begging. He talks about all these things. I'll go begging, I'll live by way. He says, no, that's not for you because you're a Kshatriya. By nature, you want to fight. That is your nature, right? And of course, this fighting is not like this selfish, self-centered fighting of today's world, right? This is righteous fighting for dharma, fighting for upholding, what is right. Right. So he's saying, you are anyway going to fight because that's your prescribed duty. So you better do this, right? Because you follow your prescribed duty because it is better than not working. And he says, one cannot even maintain one's own physical body without work. Can we maintain our body without work? We have to brush our teeth, you take bath, you have to feed food, for which we have to go earn money, then get stuff, cook, eat. Of course, nowadays cook is not mandatory, right? So you have to earn money and then you have to get food from Swiggy or wherever, right? No, you have to cook, you have to eat. So even to maintain our own body, we have to do so much work, right? So you have to do your prescribed duty. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, saying, you first figure out what is your prescribed duty and you do your work, right? Of course, and this we have discussed previously also in the second chapter. So just maybe, in 5 minutes and summarize this and close for today, and we'll continue from next week, Krishna willing. So there are four, what originally we thought in India, what we thought as caste system in India, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. This is not a caste system. This is based on guna and karma, based on this guna nature that we are talking about and the type of work that we do, right? We have a certain type of nature and we like to do certain type of work. Now, based on that guna and karma, there are four types of occupations possible, right? One is a Brahmana, who's predominantly in the mode of goodness. Like I said, I spoke about three modes. So Brahmana is predominantly in the mode of goodness. Kshatriya is in mixed modes of, goodness and passion. So he'll have some goodness, but a lot of passion, right? Then Vaishya is a combination of passion and some amount of ignorance, and Shudra is ignorance, right? So there are these are four occupations. So like Brahmana is, Patan, Patan, Yajan, Yajan, Dana, Pratigraha. So Brahmana He's not just simply, you wear like sacred thread and you go work for a software company. And that is what most of us have done, right? I mean, including myself for that matter. So, but Brahmana is Patan Patan. So he has to Brahman Janati ti Brahmana. He is the one who understands Brahman, who knows who am I, why am I here, what am I supposed to do, where am I going. He has answers to all those questions. So not only does he read and understand all these things, he also has to share it with others. So Patan is reading, Patan is teaching others. Yajan, he does sacrifices himself and he also helps others do sacrifice. And then Dana Pratigraha, he takes charity, he gives charity. These are, this is the nature of a Brahmana. Kshatriya, Kshatrayati ti Kshatriya. So he is a fighter, he is administrator, he has to upkeep the law. He knows the laws because he is read, just like a brahmachari. He's also gone to Gurukul. He's understood what is the role of a ruler, what is the role of a society, what should he be doing. And the role is simply defined as helping everyone to achieve their goal of life. And a kshatriya as an administrator is one who is supposed to be actually creating the required infrastructure to help people progress towards their goal, right? First of all, to enable people to know what the goal of their life is, and then helping them to tread that path. That is kshatriya. And then in that as part of the duty, anything that disrupts normalcy, anything that disrupts the system, the facilities that he has created, he has to protect the citizens, right? So if there is a somebody attacks from outside, enemies, etc., he has to protect people. But unfortunately, today's administrators are themselves they themselves attack us, right? I mean, we're paying so much of tax, right? 30-35% of our earnings go in tax, mostly, at least for people who are in software. And where does it go? Into a big pocket of some politician. Because really that money is supposed to be used for our welfare to create this infrastructure that I was talking about. But first of all, our administrators have no clue about what is the goal of life, their own life, and of course that of others. And then they have no idea about creating any facility. So it's and before I came to Krishna Consciousness, I used to see like my father and elders generally spending hours together discussing news and these politicians and all that. After coming to Krishna Consciousness, I realized, oh, it's a big waste of time talking about these people, because these people are the most unqualified, right, as per Shastra. But somehow, by design of Kali Yuga, they are there on top and they are ruling, but they don't know what is right, what is wrong, and they're going to only end up taking wrong decisions. So no point talking about them, right? So Kshatriyas, then there are Vaishyas. Vaishyas are businessmen. Now, from our perspective, what is our this one? We might be administrators, maybe in office. Maybe we're working in a corporate. We might be administrators. We might, or we might actually be in some, um, uh, role that we might be playing in, government, etc., etc. So it's possible. Now, those who are administrators should take up this work. I know if a Brahmana takes up this work of administration, he will not be able to do. He'll fail miserably, right? Then Vaishya is businessmen generally, they're always thinking about making money. Now, of course, making money previously was not disallowed, but there was a very clear guidance: Krishi, Go Raksha, Vanidya. Krishi, agriculture, Go Raksha, cow protection, and Vanidya is barter, some kind of creating some economic platform for people to, exchange goods, excess goods that they have, etc., etc. But nowadays, Vaishyas have become self-centered, wanting to make money for themselves, etc. Again, unfortunate fallen condition of Kali Yuga. But Vaishya, so you could be a Vaishya. Now, we've seen in India specifically, right? Like, except for some few exceptions here and there, most, Brahmanas who end up opening their own companies fail miserably, right? So we have to know our nature, and then if you can't do sales, you can't open a company, because if you open a company, you should be able to do sales, right? And if you're not Vaishya's nature, you can't do sales. And then Shudra. Now, Shudra means if I don't have Brahminical qualities, if I don't have qualities of Kshatriya, if I don't have qualities of Vaishya, that means I don't have really any specialization as such, then I help all of them, right? I can either help a Brahmana, I can either help a Kshatriya, or I can help a Vaishya, right? So most people actually, they are serving Vaishyas software, they're doing something which is being used by somebody else to generate money. For example, I was working in a company which used to do build software for a online travel space. People come by ticket for doing their own business. So I'm helping somebody else do their business, right? So I'm just like so like this, there are different people who are engaged in different kinds of occupation. Now if we cannot lead something, then we follow, right? So that's Shudra. And of course, and in Kali Yuga, it is at Kalau Shudra Sambhava. Most of the people in Kali Yuga are these worker category, right? So these, based on these natures, we need to decide, okay, am I Brahminical nature? Now, if I'm Brahminical nature, I can't stick for long in software or in business. I will become frustrated, and we hear this, right? Job frustration, job dissatisfaction, all these because of nature mismatch, right? Our nature and the job that we have taken kind of mismatch, right? And we end up being dissatisfied, then we end up changing our jobs, etc., etc., right? So this is important. This nature is important because we should understand our nature and then choose an appropriate occupation. I mean, which normally people end up doing, but after wasting a lot of time, right? Like people do engineering thinking they are engineering material. Then after many years, they say, no, I'm not engineering material. I'm management material. Then they end up doing management. So they lose so much of their life, right? Waste their lives going in some direction without knowing. So this nature is very helpful. It helps us, to deal with our own life, things around us, etc. Right? So Krishna is saying that know your nature and do your prescribed duty. That is important, and he'll say why as we progress in this chapter, right? So this is the beginning of Karma Yoga, and the rest of the chapter talks more about how work has to be done, etc., etc. So we'll continue that discussion next week, Krishna willing. So we finished verses 1 through 8 today. So I'll stop now and open it up to any questions, comments that any of you might have. Hare Krishna.